people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
De la noche, Stephanie Piñeiro.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this upcoming weekend on the undercard of Amanda Serrano versus Eric Cruz. We're going to be seeing a battle of the unbeatens in the women's featherweight division between Australia's own Skye Nicholson and Spain's own Tania Alvarez.
Skye Nicholson, who sports a professional record of 5 wins, no losses, and no draws. No recorded knockouts, not yet.
To Tania Alvarez, who sports a professional record of 7 wins, no losses, and no draws. 1 knockout, just 1 recorded knockout. A discrepancy in the fighters' ages. Skye is a very mature 27 years old to Tania Alvarez.
Tania is only 21.
They're both unbeaten fighters. They both are, but I say it all the time. Not all unbeaten fighters, not all unbeaten up-and-comers are created equal. On paper, Skye and Tania are in a similar place in their careers, but they're not in a similar place in terms of their ceiling, their ability.
Overall ability.
Stylistic clash. This stylistic matchup pits the pure boxer against the pressure fighter.
Skye Nicholson would be the pure boxer, the stick and move outside jabber, and Tania Alvarez would be the mid-range to inside fighter, the volume puncher.
You often hear it said in the sport of boxing that styles make fights, and that's very much true, but there's also the level at which the fighters compete. There's something to be said about that.
There is.
Under normal circumstances, a good pressure fighter is a nightmare for a pure boxer.
Pure boxer's kryptonite oftentimes is a pressure fighter.
That won't be the case this upcoming Saturday when Tania and Skye share the ring with each other. Tania Alvarez, who debuted as a professional in October of 2021 and saw action approximately 5 times in 2022. She saw action 5 times last year. Both Skye and Tania kept busy schedules last year.
Tania Alvarez fought 5 times last year. Skye Nicholson fought 5 times last year.
Skye Nicholson, who debuted as a professional in March of last year and has since fought 5 times in just 1 calendar year. The ideal schedule for an unbeaten up-and-comer looking to garner experience in the pro ranks.
She's going to garner that much more opposite the ring Tania Alvarez this upcoming Saturday.
You think about the fighters and their base styles, and Skye Nicholson is your according to Hoyle textbook pure boxer. Outside jabber, stick and mover,
a technician and a tactician, whereas Tania
is your according to Hoyle mid-range to inside pressure fighter.
Close quarters fighter, volume puncher. That's what she is.
She's still very raw, still very crude, and she's missing some necessary components, some necessary ingredients to effectively apply pressure on Skye Nicholson.
She's got volume, she's got inside game, and she's got toughness, but you know what she ain't got?
Foot speed. She's a flat-footed fighter, a flat-footed plotter, and if you can't keep up with and keep on that pure boxer...
Big part of the reason pressure fighters have a stylistic advantage over pure boxers is because they can keep those pure boxers under pressure and force them to work even when they don't want to.
Which eventually, over time, round after round, wears on the pure boxer's energy reserves.
Think Shavkat Rakhimov versus Zelfa Barrett. Shavkat Rakhimov, the pressure fighter, versus Zelfa Barrett, the pure boxer.
A big part of the reason that pressure fighters have a stylistic advantage over pure boxers is they force them to work even when they don't want to, and that makes them uncomfortable.
Tania Alvarez is definitely a pressure fighter. She's definitely a volume puncher and a close quarters fighter.
Stylistically, Tania's got the right base style for the job, but she's not on the level.
Skye Nicholson's level.
So if you were grading Skye Nicholson on how effective she is with that base style, that pure boxer outside jabber base style, if Skye is, say, an A- pure boxer or a B+ pure boxer, that would make Tania Alvarez C plus or a C.
A C-level pressure fighter is why.
Tania Alvarez has the right base style, but she's still lacking in other areas. How to slip and counter, roll and counter,
Whilst coming forward and applying pressure.
To the eye, Tania Alvarez, whilst being a pressure fighter, she doesn't move her head off the line enough or angle that torso.
At times, she's not side on. She stands pretty square.
Standing square, letting punches go. You get hit with the wrong shot, you might get caught off balance and hit the deck because your back foot's not behind you to support your weight.
Because you're not side on, you're giving your opponent a bigger target.
Tania Alvarez oftentimes stands pretty square.
That's not even her biggest issue ahead of this Skye Nicholson fight.
I think her biggest issue is she doesn't know how to cut off the ring. She doesn't have the foot speed to keep up and keep on Skye Nicholson, so she may not even get close enough to her.
Hey, Tania Alvarez, God bless her, she's been facing what are mostly stationary targets, girls that don't move that much to begin with.
Girls that stand right in front of her, girls that are there to be hit. And that's not necessarily a knock on Tania Alvarez. I hardly expect Tania to face killers at just 7-0, but that's the issue.
That's a problem. Tania's not accustomed to pinning down a moving target.
Skye Nicholson, that's what she's going to do. She's going to move. She's going to beat those feet and pump out that jab stick and move from the outside to prevent Tania from getting within striking distance.
Skye's a lot more athletic than Tania Alvarez. Her punches are snappier.
Got faster hands and she's faster on her feet than Tania is.
Skye's best punches are her straight punches.
One of her stronger qualities really is her movement, her pivots.
I anticipate that Tania Alvarez will greatly struggle to get off any punches on Skye Nicholson because she won't be able to get close enough to her to land them.
Skye's going to be able to tag her comfortably from the outside, and because Tania doesn't move her head much...
It's target practice for Skye.
Skye Nicholson, who's really not a big puncher, she fights on the balls of her feet. She doesn't really sit on her punches, so I don't anticipate this fight ends in a knockout. No, I'd say this fight goes to the cards. I'd say this fight goes the distance. Skye Nicholson on points is the pick this weekend.
Skye's going to win a points decision.
In other news, Showtime shocker. Linear Network rebrands as Paramount Plus with Showtime. Move comes amid streaming integration, cancellations, and potential layoffs.
Talked about this a lot in previous videos.
How Showtime really isn't a sports network and how boxing may not be a big part of their bottom line moving forward. Showtime will no longer be a standalone brand.
Paramount Global, Paramount, the parent company to Showtime, revealed on Monday that the company is rebranding the premium cable network as Paramount Plus with Showtime.
As part of a wide-ranging change that also brings the two brands together in the streaming world. Later this year, Showtime, which already went through major changes last year with the departure of David Nevins, will become Paramount Plus with Showtime across both linear
and streaming.
Showtime content will then be available on Paramount Plus's premium tier. This move applies only in the United States.
How does this pertain to boxing?
In a word, they're trimming the fat, shedding the excess, focusing on what works and discarding what doesn't.
Boxing doesn't exactly drum up huge business for the Showtime platform, you know.
The bulk of their subscribership and the bulk of their viewers are there for their story-based programming, not sports.
ESPN, DAZN, their niche is sports, and they cater to an audience that wants to see sports in particular.
Chris McCarthy, who oversees operations for the Showtime Linear Network, told staff in a note seen by Deadline that he will explain what changes mean for the company in a town hall February 23rd. As part of the changes, the company will divert investment away from areas that are underperforming and that account for, quote-unquote, less than 10% of our views.
You think he's talking about boxing?
Not just, but it's a definite possibility since what drives subscriptions for Showtime, it's not sports, it's not boxing, it's story-based programming.
That's what moves the needle for them, not PBC cards.
We've already begun conversations with our production partners about what content makes sense moving forward and which shows have franchise potential, McCarthy said.
This has led to the cancellation of shows such as Three Women, which had completed but not aired, Let the Right One In, and American Gigolo.
Those shows got the axe because they're trimming the excess, trimming the fat, focusing on what works, and discarding what doesn't.
So when you see that they're saying they're going to divert investment away from areas that are underperforming and account for less than 10% of our views.
What you then have to ask yourself is, what percentage of Showtime's overall viewership does boxing account for?
How important is boxing going to be to Showtime moving forward?
If Showtime as a platform has 27 million subscribers and on average less than a million, well under a million, actually tune in for boxing matches.
You do a card draws roughly 225,000 viewers, 225,000 homes.
225,000 is less than 10% of 27 million.
Less than 10% is an understatement. That's actually less than 1%.
Less than 1% of Showtime's overall viewers and their subscribers, less than 1% of them are tuning in to these boxing matches. So on the heels of this news, this potential rebrand,
the question then becomes, how long will Showtime be in the business of boxing?
HBO left boxing years ago, and they've survived, they've thrived with their HBO Max platform.
They're doing just fine without boxing content. It was the end of an era because HBO was the gold standard.
The gold standard in the sport of boxing once upon a time, but many years ago, on December 8th of 2018, HBO officially left the sport of boxing.
So it's not outside the realm of possibility that Showtime boxing might suffer a similar fate.
Because they're both premium cable networks that primarily specialize in story-based programming anyway. They're not sports networks.
And I know what you're thinking. I know what you're asking yourself. You're asking yourself, if all of this is true, and it might affect the PBC's cards moving forward, then why are they still announcing shows?
Yesterday, the Showtime platform announced a series of fights they're going to be staging from early February into late March. Approximately four cards, one of them being a pay-per-view.
You ask yourself, if all of this stuff is true and Showtime might be leaving boxing, then why are they still announcing fights?
Well, pay attention to the fights that they're announcing. Which ones are on the regular Showtime platform and which ones are being billed as pay-per-views? And you'll notice that the fights on the regular Showtime platform, the ones that aren't pay-per-views, these are very inexpensive fights to put on. I mean, Ray Vargas versus Oshaki Foster, a super featherweight contest. Neither one of those two guys make per fight what a Stevenson makes per fight or a Haney makes per fight.
It's a very inexpensive fight to put on. Matias versus Ponce.
Neither one of those two guys is seven-figure fighters, even though that's a title fight.
Figueroa versus Magsayo. You ain't gotta break the bank to pay either Brandon Figueroa or Mark Magsayo.
Naturally, guy like David Benavidez, guy like Caleb Plant, you might have to pay them substantially more than you'd have to pay any of the aforementioned fighters, but that's why their fight isn't on the regular Showtime platform. It's on pay-per-view.
It's on pay-per-view because Showtime is hoping that the money to pay the fighters comes from me and you.
Not them, as Showtime isn't dedicating its resources to anything that accounts for less than 10% of their overall viewership.
Boxing matches fall under that category.
And you'll notice that after March, the only PBC cards that we know of, the only ones that are on the schedule, those are all pay-per-views. Spence versus Thurman, Davis versus Garcia, presumably Wilder versus Ruiz, even though it doesn't have a fight date yet.
Showtime ain't about to break the bank giving those fighters massive guarantees.
And around the time those fights go down, you want to pay attention to that. What exactly are these fighters being guaranteed?
Nothing astronomical, since boxing isn't a big part of Showtime's bottom line.
How could it be? It accounts for less than 1% of their overall subscribership and viewers. They're hoping that the money to even bankroll those fights comes directly from the fans, since Showtime is reallocating its resources.
Huge guarantees staying in the budget. They're not about to break the bank to pay these guys.
This is something you want to pay attention to. What is the future of Showtime? Showtime boxing, as it were, on the heels of this news.
It's their future in the sport. Do they even have one?
Well, I think if he loses, I think that'll be the case. There's no doubt about that. What do I think? I would have much rather him facing either Joyce or Daniel Dubois. Great fight for the public. Easy to make.
While it is true that the boxing community at large in the United Kingdom would rather see Anthony Joshua face the likes of a Joyce or a Daniel Dubois more so than a Sean Franklin, the disingenuous part is that those are easy fights to make.
It's where Frank is being disingenuous. There's nothing easy about it. Anthony Joshua is exclusive to the DAZN platform.
Per the deal that went into effect after the Usyk rematch and per Anthony Joshua's career-long commitment to the Matchroom promotional banner.
In case you guys forgot,
a series of announcements that were made ahead of the Usyk rematch that Anthony Joshua would box exclusively on the DAZN platform moving forward, and for the duration of his career, he would remain a matchroom fighter, where Frank says that those are easy fights to make, perhaps if you're willing to do what you need to do to make them.
You'd have to send Joyce and Daniel Dubois over to DAZN.
If you're willing to, and if you are, those would be easy fights to make, since neither Daniel Dubois or Joyce have the same marquee value as Anthony Joshua. Let's just call a spade a spade.
Neither one of those two guys is the same box office draw that he is, and if he's not a box office draw, then you tell me why you're still talking about him.
Why else would you be talking about Eddie's fighter?
Come on now, make it make sense. You got a guy, he's coming off of 2 consecutive losses. He's got no belt.
If we go by the cover story, your golden goose, Tyson Fury, was trying to get in the ring with this guy late last year. Why is that? Do you normally...
Why was everybody talking about how big that fight is in the UK?
Why was Tyson Fury extending Anthony Joshua that olive branch? Because of how nice a guy he is, or because Anthony Joshua, in spite of those 2-3 losses...
He's still worth a lot of money. More than Joyce and more than Daniel Dubois.
If Joyce is on the cusp of fighting for an alphabet title, why are you worried about Anthony Joshua? Why are you still tacking on the names of your fighters to that fighter?
I'm a boxing fan first. I'm a consumer before I'm anything.
And I like the idea of those fights. I like the idea of Joshua versus Joyce or Joshua versus Dubois, but I wasn't born yesterday, and I know how this works. Anthony Joshua's got more marquee value than both of those guys, irrespective of where they are in their careers or where they are in the ranks right now. He's worth a lot more money than they are, so if you're serious about doing a fight with him, you have to acquiesce to being the B-side. You'd have to send them over to DAZN for the fight to happen, and I know you're not about to do that.
And you know you're not about to do that.
So what are you doing when you attach the names of those fighters to that fighter? What are you really doing?
You're so worried about him fighting Sean Franklin.
Why don't you worry about Daniel Dubois' development? Why don't you worry about who Joyce is going to face in his next fight?
Because we both know you're not going to send those guys to DAZN.
You're not going to do it. Would Frank Warren be talking about his guys versus that guy if that guy wasn't worth no money? You think he wouldn't relish the opportunity to bring a big Anthony Joshua fight to BT Sport?
You wish Eddie would send him over like he sent over Felix Cash and John Ryder. You wish!
You fucking wish he'd send that guy over. Hey, I got a question. Why don't you send Daniel Dubois over just as easily as he sent Felix Cash and John Ryder over?
Yeah.
Why don't you do that?
Why not?
What are you gonna do, huh? What are you gonna do? You're gonna try to convince the world that Daniel Dubois is in the same stratosphere as Anthony Joshua in terms of marquee value while he's getting slapped around by cruiserweights?
What are you gonna do?
I'd wager that Joshua versus Franklin turns out to be a bigger fight that gets more attention than either Joyce's next fight or Daniel Dubois'.
I'd wager.
Whether people want to accept it or not, Anthony Joshua still is one of the biggest, if not the biggest draw in the heavyweight division. When he moves, people pay attention whether they like him or not.
And that includes Frank Warren.
You're on the eve of the undisputed fight with Fury and Usyk, and who are you talking about? You're talking about Anthony Joshua.
There's a reason for that.